Previs over the last 10 or 15 years has gone from just a few practitioners like Stephen and George, and well, I started with George Lucas, so he was one of the early pioneers, and Lucasfilm was one of the early incubators of the current Previs companies now. So back then it was just a few people, but now I think a lot of people really use Previs a lot. I think there's maybe a few people that push back here and there just because they don't want to do dialogue scenes and things like that, or they want to have a little more creative freedom on set. I think there's sort of a romantic notion that you can walk on set and magic will happen. But today, audiences are just their expectations are so high, and they're very savvy, and they understand film much better than people did even 20 years ago, where we just don't go to the theater to be entertained, where we go there to be absolutely blown away, right? So if you look at the way people are using previs now, it's used pretty heavily. I mean, like a movie like Life of Pi, we did 90 minutes of that film. We spent 2.5 years on it. We did 90 minutes of previs. We did almost the entire film of post-vis. And my crew went and started in Los Angeles. They worked with Aang in New York. They worked with him in Taiwan and in India. And without previs, that film probably wouldn't have been the way it ultimately turned out, because Aang was stuck with a kid in a boat in a blue tank. No tiger, no animals, no ocean, no god storm, no clouds. So it's like having that visual reference in front of you to understand where you were narratively in the context of the story, because at the end of the day, it was sort of the environment was a character as well, not just the kid, and the tiger was completely missing. So it was a tremendous foundation for them to start from in order to know where they were technically in the story, but still allow themselves flexibility to be inspired on the day. One of the more inspiring parts about doing previs is that you really get to put a lot of yourself into your work. Regardless of who's directing the film, regardless of where the creative energy is coming from, at the end of the day, you're responsible for implementing it. You're responsible for animating the character, blocking several characters, moving the camera through space, understanding how a space works and how it feels. And that's one of the inspiring parts. I mean, one of the biggest responsibilities, or one of the toughest things to understand as a previs director or previs supervisor is to do what is being asked, not necessarily what's being told to you. So a lot of times, like, a director will have like a 10,000-foot vision, and if you understand that vision, you can help bring those ideas through. Like, they may say, well, this is exactly what I want, but like any creative process, I may be telling my artists, well, this is the way I think it should be. But as the artist works through it, they can see that maybe 10% or maybe 50% or more of that is sort of subject to interpretation, because I've left a lot of sort of open pieces. I've sort of said, this is the way the beginning of the shot should start, this is the story it should tell, and this is the way it should end, but there's some interpretation to get there, right? Because there's practical limitations, there's maybe there's something mechanical in the way, or you just never quite know. So you have to put a lot of yourself into it in order to sort of get to the end. And oftentimes it's an interpretive game. And I think everybody on a film production set plays that game, right? It's like a production designer will design things that they know will accommodate everything that the script is calling for, even though it's not exactly what a director has asked for. But at the end of the day, a good director will be a collaborator, and they'll recognize that they're not always an island unto themselves, and that it's the people around them that all come together to make that pot of soup. And we're all responsible for doing the best work we can, and hopefully making the best product we can. Who's ultimately in control of the vision of a film? The director, really. At the end of the day, we're all serving, hopefully, that, in an ideal world at least. And where's the best place to make mistakes? Where's the best place to come up with ideas? It's usually earlier in the process instead of later. And the visual effects process classically comes at the end. Once you've actually shot the film, you're very close to your release date, and there's all these things there's all these things going on that have already been decided. I guess at that point, it seems to me you're fixing rather than implementing, or rather than having a vision up front that you can implement. So, I mean, if visual effects houses were really the best people to be doing previs, they'd probably be doing previs, and a lot of them do. As a specialized previs company, that's what we focus on. We focus on doing things fast and inexpensively, but with a high level degree of creativity and finish that everybody in the production process can quote unquote see what is coming next. And the earlier you can make those decisions, the more money you're going to save, the more efficiently you can get what you need, the more, hopefully the better product you can produce at the end. Just like any other decision. If I made decisions at my company on the last minute all the time, we'd always be chasing ourselves, we'd always be chasing our tail, and we'd never get ahead of the game or plan or innovate to try to get over our competition or anything like that. It's the same thing with making a movie. It's a business, it's a process, and the earlier you can make good decisions in the process, hopefully the better those decisions will be at the end of the process. Looking forward, we've always had our eyes towards video game engines. I've been saying this for like a decade now. But I think we're finally getting to a point where they're actually finally accessible. At GDC this year, Unreal Tournament came out, $20 a month, 5%. Or 5% commissions on an actual product, like if you were to produce a game with it. But for linear content, i.e. storytelling, tools, that kind of stuff, it's just $20 a month. So now all of a sudden, an engine like Unreal is completely accessible to a company like ours. Like I think the next day Crytek came out, $10 a month, 0% commission. So, it's now, because the battle has always been, can you pay for a license? How many licenses do you need? And we're always like, well, but we're not creating a product. And they're like, well, we don't have a pricing model for that. So now that's kind of moot at this point. I mean, Unity for a long time was sort of like the price leader, $2,500. You get a seat, and you can do all your exporting, or you can use the free tools, right? But even $2,500 and Unity, we're always kind of like, well, I don't know about Unity, blah blah. It seems like a mobile app platform. Obviously, it's a lot more than that, but now that there's suddenly 3 engines completely within grasp for very reasonable prices, I think you're going to see in the next year some pretty strong moves towards that kind of technology. But there also needs to be some support on the engine developer side as well. I mean, they've built these products, they've got great engines, but they've got these tools that are sort of a mixed bag of bits and pieces that are sort of familiar to artists that are used to using Maya. At this point, it's basically just a matter of finding a client who's sort of willing to put up with the evolution of the process, getting the artists up to speed, and then finding the sweet spot where we can actually make those tools work for us. A couple of more mundane things that we're doing now is we're fully invested in Maya's Viewport 2.0, so like DX11 shaders, shadows, motion blur, screen space, ambient occlusion, all that kind of stuff. So, just by turning that on, and that's like a default setting for us now. So just by turning all those things on, we've already sort of brought our quality level up without really costing us any time at the end. So, shadows and lighting can have a dramatic impact on how people view previs. It hasn't been gray shaded hues for a very long time. We've sort of pushed and maximized the regular viewport for many years, but now that we've got actually sort of a pseudo-y kind of real-time game engine in Maya, that's helped a lot. So people's mindsets, I think, are a lot closer to what like a video game engine would do. I have a decently strong opinion about the difference between previs companies and VFX companies, and I think there's a lot of differences actually. And I think they are completely two separate disciplines, really. And I think they're separated by sort of a mindset. I mean, I've worked in visual effects. I was a visual effects supervisor on a George Lucas project that we did in between 2 Star Wars films. I've lived in that world. I've done shots. And now I own and operate and have been doing previs for 15 years. And I've seen sort of the evolution of both sides of the fence. Typically, previs exists because of the democratization of like cheap hardware and easily accessible software. And we don't really use any of that to its maximum. We're really only using like a percentage of that power and software to create, hopefully 75–80% of what needs to be done, but we're doing it in 5 or 10% of the time. And we're really focused on iteration and storytelling first, not so much digital craft or finishing what the final look of those pixels are going to be. I mean, obviously we do a lot of design in terms of shot design. Sometimes we do even set design. We do all sorts of different aspects depending on how early in the process we're coming to the party at. It's like when we're doing pitch viz, sometimes there's just really no art department. It's just the director coming to us with the script, and he doesn't even have money from a studio or an investor yet, and he's just saying, hey, listen, help me out. I've got this vision, but I need to kind of design this stuff, and we're going to go shoot some plates, and then we're going to put together a little pitch viz, maybe put together a trailer or whatnot. And for us, it's really all about sort of just, moving through it as fast as possible and coming up with the best way to tell the story. But in the visual effects pipeline, I tend to find that the visual effects studios are always sort of chasing the better looking pixel, the better looking image. How are they going to make this stuff look so amazing that the audience in the theater is going to just have their minds blown? And those are two very different mindsets, because in the previous world, we're just like, we don't really care what those final pixels look like. We do, but it's not like the end-all be-all of our existence. And so I tend to find that previs is less of a science project than visual effects is, because rightfully so, VFX is focused on the final image, and it's got to be a science project. It's got to be better, faster, crazier, more of this, higher level comping, 2K, 4K, 8K, whatever it is, and we don't care about any of that. So I think in terms of where the mindset of most visual effects companies are, they are where they should be in terms of finishing images and making stuff look beautiful and winning Oscars for that. But I think that's where previs and visual effects diverge, and why typically there are still dedicated previs companies that are approached for major feature films, and why there are separate VFX companies that are tasked with actually finishing those feature films. My time at FMX, I presented the second 2 panels of the first day. So it was nothing like getting off the plane and being hot right off the runway. So, but my presentations went well received. I think people enjoyed them, and now I look forward to enjoying the other panels that other presenters are giving.